You notice it before you see it. A change in the quality of the light coming through the kitchen window. The white glare of August softening into something grayer, thicker, more forgiving on the eyes. You are standing at the counter with a dish towel in your hand, and you set it down and go to the window, and there it is. The sky has closed over like a lid settling onto a jar, and the first drops are already darkening the pavement outside in small, spreading coins. The window has been open since morning. You left it that way on purpose, the way you have all summer, because the heat outside was better than the heat trapped indoors, and because there is something in you that resists closing a window while the season still has warmth to offer. On the sill, the curtain lifts and falls with a breeze that smells, for now, still like August. Cut grass somewhere, warm stone, the faint sweetness of the fruit bowl on the counter behind you, where 2 peaches and a small cluster of grapes sit ripening past their peak, skins taut, ready to be eaten today or tomorrow, and not much longer than that. You let the rain announce itself a while longer before you do anything about it. It comes gently at first, a scatter of drops on the leaves of the tree outside, then a fuller sound, water finding the gutter, finding the drain pipe, finding its rhythm. You lean your forearms on the counter and watch it for a minute, maybe 2, not thinking about much of anything, just registering the way the world outside has gone soft focus, the neighboring rooftops blurring at their edges, the color draining out of the day the way it does when weather moves in. There is a specific kind of quiet that comes with rain like this, not silence, because the sound of it is constant, but a hush underneath the sound, as if the rain itself is asking everything else to lower its voice. You feel your shoulders drop half an inch without deciding to drop them. Whatever plans the day might have held loosen their grip. This is the kind of afternoon that rearranges itself around you rather than the other way around. Further off, past the rooftops, a low rumble moves through the air without any real conviction behind it, more a suggestion of thunder than the thing itself, and it doesn't repeat. You wait for it anyway, the way you always do, some old habit of counting seconds you never quite finish. Nothing follows. Just the rain, settling more firmly into its work, finding new surfaces to land on, the wide leaf of the plant on the step outside, the lid of the bin at the side of the house, the top rail of the fence, each one giving off its own small percussion, layered under the larger sound of it striking the pavement and the roof and the gutter all at once. It is not a hard rain. It has no urgency in it. It sounds, if anything, like something settling in for the length of an afternoon rather than passing through. You notice the temperature of the air on your bare arms before you notice you're noticing it, a coolness that wasn't there this morning. Not cold exactly, but a definite retreat from the thick warmth of the last several weeks. You rub one arm with the opposite hand, an unconscious gesture, and glance again at the fruit bowl on the counter, the peaches still holding their color, still a few days from turning. Summer's evidence sitting patiently in a room that is, degree by degree, minute by minute, becoming somewhere else. You cross the room and ease the window down. Slow, so the old frame doesn't complain too loudly, and the outside sound changes character immediately. Softer, rounder. The rain now something you hear through a pane of glass, rather than something you stand inside of. You rest your palm flat against the glass for a moment. It's cool, already cooler than it was an hour ago. A small physical fact that tells you more clearly than any calendar could that summer has started, quietly and without ceremony, to hand things over. You don't turn on the overhead light yet. The room holds a gray, even brightness that rain brings, shadowless and a little melancholy in the pleasant way. and you find you don't mind sitting in it a while. You go through to the hallway and open the closet at the end of it, the tall one, wedged behind the coats, and crouch down in front of a cardboard box on the lower shelf, the one you wrote on in marker last year. The ink faded now to a soft brown gray. Autumn, it says. Nothing more specific than that. You never need it to say more. The tape gives with a small tearing sound that feels satisfying in your ears, and the flaps spring open the way they always do, holding the shape of last year's folding. Inside, everything is a little dusty in that particular way of things kept in a dark closet for 10 months. Not dirty, just quiet, waiting. You sit back on your heels and look into the box before touching anything, the way you might look at a table before a meal, taking in what's there before you begin. There's a garland folded in on itself near the top, its fabric leaves dry and slightly stiff to the touch, the kind of stiffness that will soften again once it's been handled a little. Underneath it, wrapped in a dish towel gone soft with reuse, 3 small pumpkins made of painted wood, each one a slightly different orange, one with a green stem, one with a stem gone gray with age. There's a smaller pouch, cinched with string, that you know without opening holds dried leaves, real ones, pressed flat 2 autumns ago, kept because you liked the color they turned and didn't want to let that go to waste in a compost bin. And near the bottom, wrapped more carefully than anything else, 2 thick candles, one used down to about 2/3 of its original height, the other new, still in its cellophane, faintly waxy smelling even through the wrapper. You move each item aside as you catalog it, not lifting anything out yet, just touching and naming and setting it gently back in its place, the way you might read the first page of a book you already love before deciding you have time to read the rest. Wedged into one corner, half flattened, is a small paper bag you don't immediately remember, and when you open it, you find a handful of cinnamon sticks, brittle and curled, kept from some batch of mulled something 2 or 3 years back. Their scent so faint now it's almost theoretical. You have to bring the bag right up under your nose and inhale slowly to catch it at all. A dry, warm, papery ghost of a smell that nonetheless does exactly what stronger smells do, pulling some earlier version of this same afternoon up out of wherever memory keeps such things. Beneath the towel-wrapped pumpkins, flattened under the weight of everything above it, there's a length of ribbon, burnt orange, gone slightly dusty, that you don't remember buying but must have at some point, for some purpose you no longer recall, and you set it aside on the floor next to you without deciding yet whether it has a job this year. Not everything in the box needs to come out. Some years the ribbon stays folded at the bottom, waiting. This might be one of those years, or it might not, and you find you don't need to decide that right now, sitting on the hallway floor with the closet door open and the rain going on steadily somewhere behind you. Out past the front room, out past the window you haven't yet returned to. You lift the garland out first and let it unspool across your lap, and the smell that comes up from it is a smell you'd forgotten you associate with this particular time of year. Not the leaves themselves, since they're fabric, but something in the box itself, cardboard and old dust, and a trace of the cedar closet it's been sitting in. A smell that arrives with no warning and immediately relocates you to some earlier October, half-remembered, pleasant in its vagueness. You sit there a moment longer than you need to, just breathing it in, letting the box do what it always does before you've even hung a single thing. You carry the garland into the main room, trailing it slightly behind you, like something you're walking a dog, and you stand in front of the mantel or the shelf above the window, wherever it goes each year, some fixed point that has become, without your ever deciding it formally, the place where the room turns its own private page. You drape it first without pinning it, letting it fall in loose loops, standing back to see how the curve of it sits, adjusting a foot of slack here, tightening a loop there. The little fabric leaves catch what light there is: burnt orange, deep red, a mustard yellow that has faded slightly with age into something even better than the original color, softer, more convincing. Outside, the rain has settled into steadiness. You can hear it more than see it now, since you're facing into the room, but every so often a gust presses it harder against the glass behind you, a brief drumming that rises and falls away again, and you find yourself pausing each time it happens, garland still in your hands, listening the way you'd listen to someone speaking in another room. Not the words, just the presence of the voice. When the garland is finally settled, hanging the way you want it, you step back to look at it properly, hands on your hips, the small, private satisfaction of a thing done well enough. It changes the room already, just that one gesture, a line of color where there was bare shelf before, a suggestion of the whole season contained in a single arranged object. The rest of the room still looks like summer around it. The light cotton throw still folded on the arm of the chair, the pale curtains, the fruit bowl visible through the doorway behind you. The garland sits in the middle of all that like a sentence someone has started but not yet finished. You reach up and adjust one leaf that's fallen the wrong way, turning it so its painted vein catches the gray window light instead of hiding it, and in doing so, your hand brushes the edge of the shelf and disturbs a little of the dust that settled there over the summer months. Not much, just enough to see when it catches the light at the right angle, drifting down in a thin, unhurried column before it disappears again into the general dimness of the room. You wipe the shelf once with the flat of your hand before you notice you're doing it, an old habit, tidying without meaning to, and the small, cleared strip of wood beneath the garland looks, for a moment, like the first fully finished inch of the whole afternoon's work. You step back again, further this time, all the way to the doorway, to see the garland from the distance you'll actually be looking at it from later, curled up somewhere in the room rather than standing right in front of it. From here, the colors read differently, less like individual leaves and more like a single warm band of color, the kind of thing your eye will simply register as autumn without needing to examine any one part of it too closely. You nod to yourself, satisfied, and the rain fills the silence where a second opinion might otherwise have gone, steady against the glass, unbothered by your small domestic decisions, continuing exactly as it was continuing before you looked away from it. You go back for the pumpkins next, carrying all three cupped together in one hand, their painted surfaces cool and a little slick, the way varnished wood always feels. You set them along the windowsill in the front room, spacing them by eye, turning each one slightly until its better side, the side with less chipped paint, the cleaner curve of the stem, faces the room rather than the glass. The rain is close here, right on the other side of the pane, and you find yourself glancing up between adjustments, watching a particularly heavy run of water travel down the glass in a long, unbroken thread before it splits and scatters into smaller ones. You add the pouch of dried leaves next, untying the string carefully because the leaves inside are brittle enough now that a rough hand could crumble one, and you lay a few of them flat along the sill between the pumpkins, their edges curled slightly upward, their color gone from the bright red and gold you remember pressing them at to a deeper, quieter version of those same colors, more like the color of the color, if that makes any sense to you as you think it, less like the original leaf and more like the memory of it. One of the leaves has a small split near its stem, an old crack from some previous handling, and you set that one slightly further back than the others, propped instead of flat, so the crack doesn't show as readily. It's a small vanity, arranging a dried leaf for its better angle, and you're aware of the smallness of it even as you do it, but there's no one here to find it strange, and the sill looks better for the adjustment. and that's reason enough on an afternoon with no other reasons required of it. You run one finger lightly along the row you've made. Pumpkin, leaf, pumpkin, leaf, pumpkin. Feeling the difference between the smooth, varnished wood and the papery dryness of the leaves. A small tactile survey of the whole arrangement before you step back to look at it from a distance, the way you did with the garland. From a few feet away, the row settles into a single pleasing line against the gray window, orange and brown and rust catching what little light comes through the rain-heavy glass. And behind it, the wet world outside continues on exactly as it was, indifferent and steady, a plain backdrop for the small, bright collection you've assembled in front of it. For a while, you just stand at the window doing this slow, small work, in the physical rhythm of it. Pick something up, turn it, set it down, adjust, step back, look. Settles into something almost meditative. There's no rush anywhere in it. You're not decorating for anyone's arrival, not preparing for a gathering. It's just you and the box and the rain and the slow accumulation of small orange and red and brown things finding their places around the room, one object at a time, each one a tiny anchor pulling the space further from August and closer to whatever comes next. You lean in close to the glass at one point, close enough that your breath fogs a small patch of it, and through the blur you can just make out the shape of the street beyond the front garden. A parked car gone dark and glossy with rain, the outline of the hedge across the way, all of it softened into something more like a watercolor than the sharp, sun-bleached version of the same view you'd have seen from this exact spot a week ago. You wipe the fog away with the side of your hand, and for a second the view is clear again before the glass begins, almost immediately, to gather a faint new mist from the difference in temperature between your skin and the cool pane. A drip has found its way to the outer sill, you notice, a persistent bead of water working its way along the lower edge of the window frame outside, and you watch it travel a slow inch before it falls, replaced almost at once by another bead forming in the same place, the whole process repeating itself in a loop you could watch, if you let yourself, for far longer than the task in front of you actually requires. You catch yourself watching it anyway, one of the small pumpkins still in your hand, forgotten for a moment, before you remember what you were doing and set it down in its place among the others. At some point, you notice how gray the room has gotten, without your registering the gradual dimming of it, the daylight through the rain-heavy sky now thin and flat and a little cold-looking, even though the room itself is perfectly warm. You cross to the lamp on the side table, the one with the fabric shade the color of tea, and switch it on, and the change it makes is immediate and disproportionate to how small a gesture it is. A circle of warm gold light blooms against the grayness, catching the edge of the garland, catching the curve of one pumpkin, throwing a soft shadow of the lampshade's fringe against the wall behind it. You turn on the second lamp too, the smaller one near the bookshelf, and between the two of them, the room shifts from something merely lit to something that feels, for the first time today, genuinely warm. Not in temperature, though it's that too, but in the visual sense, amber instead of gray, close instead of distant. You leave the overhead light off. It was never really necessary, and there's something about the two lamps working alone that suits the room better right now. Pools of warm light with soft-edged darkness between them. The rain outside now visible mostly as movement against the black-gray of the glass rather than as detail. You stand in the middle of the room for a moment just to see it this way. Garland catching lamp glow, pumpkins throwing small shadows, the fruit bowl in the next room barely visible in the dimness, summer's last color receding into the background, the way a voice recedes when someone else starts speaking. You notice, standing there, how differently the room holds sound now compared to how it held light a moment ago. The rain hasn't gotten any louder, but with the lamps on and the gray daylight demoted to something in the background, your attention seems to settle into your ears in a way it wasn't before, picking out details in the sound you hadn't separated out until now. There's the steady bass layer of it against the roof, and under that, a slightly different pitch where it strikes the window glass, and under that, fainter still, the specific trickle of the downspout at the corner of the house. 3 distinct textures of the same water, doing 3 different things a few feet apart from each other. You cross to check that the smaller lamp shade is sitting straight. It's tilted very slightly, enough that a thin wedge of brighter light spills onto the wall where the fabric doesn't quite cover the bulb, and you nudge it back into place with one finger, and the wedge of light closes back into the same soft, even circle as its twin across the room. Small as it is, the correction pleases you out of proportion to its size. This is the kind of afternoon where such small corrections are the whole of the work, and the whole of the satisfaction, too. It's around this point that you realize your hands are a little cold. The kind of cold that comes not from the temperature of the room, but from having been near a closed window and a box that spent months in an unheated closet. And you think, without much deliberation, that something warm to drink would suit the afternoon exactly. You go through to the kitchen, and the transition itself is its own small pleasure, leaving the lamp-lit room for the brighter, plainer kitchen light, the sound of the rain changing again as you move through the house. Louder here, where a section of gutter empties somewhere close to this window, a steady, almost domestic trickle just outside the wall. You fill the kettle and set it on to heat, and while you wait, you find a mug, the same one probably that you always reach for on a day like this, worn smooth at the handle from years of the same grip, and you spoon in what you're in the mood for, tea or cocoa or something in between, whatever it is that today asks for, and you don't examine the choice too closely. The kettle takes its time, and you lean against the counter and watch the window above the sink, where the rain runs in fatter, faster lines than it did on the front room glass, this window catching more of the wind's push. When the kettle finally sounds, you pour, and the sound of the water hitting the mug changes pitch as it fills, and steam rises up in a loose, wandering column that catches the kitchen light and turns visible for a second before dissolving into the air above it. You stir once, twice, and the smell reaches you before the taste does. That particular warm sweetness, a little like the inside of a cupboard, comforting in a way that doesn't need explaining. You wrap both hands around the mug once it's cool enough to hold properly, and the warmth moves into your palms first, then up through your wrists, small and immediate and entirely welcome. You stand there a moment longer than the task requires, letting the heat work its way into your hands, watching the last of the steam thin out above the mug's rim into nothing you can quite see anymore, just a faint waver in the air, like the shimmer above a road in summer, except cool instead of hot, gentle instead of relentless. Through the kitchen window, the rain hasn't let up at all, still finding the same gutter, still tracing the same fat, unhurried lines down the same pane of glass, and beyond it, the garden has gone the particular deep, saturated green that only happens when everything in it is thoroughly wet. The hedge, the grass, the single rose bush by the fence, all of it a shade darker and richer than it manages to look under ordinary daylight. You take a first small sip right there at the counter, testing the temperature, and it's still a little too hot, sharp against your tongue in a way that makes you draw a short breath in afterward, and you set it down to let it cool a moment more before you commit to carrying it anywhere. In the quiet of the kitchen, with the rain going on steadily outside and the last of the steam still curling faintly off the surface, you catch yourself simply standing still, doing nothing at all, waiting on nothing more urgent than a drink cooling by half a degree. The kind of pause that never happens on an ordinary busy day, and that this particular gray afternoon seems to be handing you freely without your even having asked for it. You carry it back through the house the way you'd carry something fragile, careful of the doorway, careful of the step down into the front room, and the room receives you the way it received you a few minutes ago, except now it feels more finished for you, having stepped out of it and back in. The lamps still glowing, the garland still catching their light, the rain still moving steadily against the dark glass. You take a first sip standing right there in the middle of the room, and it's good, in the uncomplicated way that a warm drink on a rainy day is always good, no matter how many times you've had exactly this experience before. You feel it settle somewhere behind your sternum, a small internal warmth to match the lamp warmth around you. You carry the mug to the windowsill among the pumpkins and the dried leaves and set it down carefully, angling it so the handle faces out where your hand will find it again easily, and you let it sit there a moment, steam still rising thin and pale against the darker rain glass behind it, while you go back to the box to see what's left inside. What's left is the candles. You lift them out together, still nested against each other the way they were packed, and set them on the low table near the chair, and for a moment you just look at them, the shorter one worn down in a slightly uneven slope from last year's burning, its wick blackened and bent, the other still perfect, wrapped, waiting for its first flame. You unwrap the new one slowly, peeling the cellophane back and setting it aside, and the smell that reaches you as the wax is exposed to open air is faint but unmistakable, something warm and slightly sweet, beeswax or soy or whatever this particular candle is made from, a smell that on its own means almost nothing, but that your body seems to recognize instantly as the smell of the season arriving in earnest. You find the box of matches in the drawer of the side table, where it lives all year for exactly this purpose, and you carry both candles to their place, the mantel, or the low shelf, or wherever in your room feels right, somewhere you'll be able to see the flame from where you plan to sit. You set them down, straighten them, strike the match, and for a second the small flare of it is the brightest thing in the room, brighter even than the lamps, a sharp orange spark against all that soft amber. You touch it to the first wick and hold it there a beat longer than strictly necessary, watching the flame catch, watching it steady itself from a nervous flicker into something calm and upright, and then you light the second one the same way and shake the match out and set it down. For a moment you simply stand there and watch both flames settle into their rhythm, two small, steady lights among the lamps, and the smell reaches you almost immediately now. Warm wax, a faint sweetness, and underneath it, something that might be your imagination, but feels real anyway. The smell of the whole season, condensed into this one small, ongoing chemical fact of fire meeting wax, meeting air. This is the moment the room actually changes. Not the garland, not the pumpkins, not even the lamps. This. The flame is small, and it asks nothing of you. But something in the room, in you, settles around it the way the room settled around the sound of the rain earlier. A quiet agreement that the year has turned a page and isn't turning it back. You sit down slowly in the chair across from where the candles are burning, mug still on the windowsill behind you. And for a while, you don't do anything else at all. You just watch the two flames move. Never wildly, just a small, constant motion, leaning one way and then correcting. The wax at the base of the older candle already glossy and starting to pool. The rain continues its steady work against the glass, unbothered, unhurried. And between the sound of it and the small movement of the flames, the room feels, for the first time all day, completely finished. Not because there's nothing left to arrange, but because you no longer feel any pull to arrange anything more. The light in the room now comes from 3 separate warm sources instead of 2, and you notice how they overlap without competing. The lamp nearest the candles washing out their glow a little where the 2 lights meet, while further across the room, the candlelight alone reaches only faintly, a last soft flicker just visible on the underside of the garland where it hangs a few feet away. Somewhere in the layering of all that light, the last gray trace of the window has stopped mattering. You'd have to turn and look directly at it now to remember that outside, the rain is still falling on a world that's gotten fully dark with cloud, no longer just dim. A faint tick and settle comes from somewhere near the candles, wax finding a new level, or the wick shifting slightly as it burns down into the pool it's created. And you watch to see if it changes anything about the flame's shape. It doesn't, not really. It burns exactly as it was burning a minute ago, upright, unbothered. And you find something quietly reassuring in that consistency. The way the smallest and most fragile-looking thing in the room turns out to be the steadiest. Eventually, you get up again. Not because the room needs it, but because there's a pleasant restlessness left in you still. The last of the day's energy wanting one more small task before it lets you rest. You retrieve the wool throw from the back of the chair, the heavier one, put away all summer in favor of the cotton throw that's still draped over the chair arm, and you carry it to the sofa and let it fall open across the cushions, its texture rough and dense under your palm in a way the cotton one never was. A texture that seems, on its own, to lower the room's temperature by a couple of pleasant degrees just by suggestion. You fold the cotton throw and set it aside on a shelf, not put away yet, just relieved of duty for the season. And the wool one takes its place, and the gesture feels less like tidying and more like handing something a role it's been waiting all year to play. You return to the windowsill for your mug, which is cooled from very hot to comfortably warm, the ideal drinking temperature, and you take it with you back to the chair, or maybe to the sofa now, under the wool throw. And you draw your feet up under you and settle in properly for the first time since you started this whole slow project. From here, you can see everything you've built this afternoon in one glance. Garland along the shelf, pumpkins and leaves on the sill, lamps glowing gold against the grayness, 2 candles burning steady near the mantel, rain moving in its endless soft patterns against every window in the house. The fruit bowl is still visible in the next room, summer's last stubborn color holding its ground in the kitchen, while autumn quietly finishes taking over the front room. And you find you don't need to choose between them. Both can be true in the same house on the same afternoon. The wool under your legs has a particular smell to it too, now that you notice. Something faintly like the inside of the closet it just came out of. Cedar and stored fabric, mixing with the beeswax smell still drifting over from the candles. And underneath both of those, the last trace of whatever's still steaming faintly from the mug in your hands. None of the smells fight each other. They layer instead, each one occupying its own quiet register, the way the sounds in the room have been doing all afternoon. Rain as the constant floor beneath everything, the occasional soft tick of a candle, your own unhurried breathing, and nothing else asking to be heard over any of it. You shift slightly, tucking one foot more fully beneath the other, and the throw resettles around you with a small, dry rustle, wool against wool, before falling still again. Outside, the light has gone further still, the gray of the afternoon deepening by degrees toward whatever comes after gray on a day like this. Not night yet, not for a while, but heading there without hurry, exactly the way everything else about this day has moved, one unhurried degree at a time, nothing sudden, nothing announced. You take another sip of your drink, and it's cooler now, gentler, less urgent than the first sip was, and you find that suits your mood better anyway. The rain hasn't changed its rhythm in the last hour, hasn't grown harder or softer, just continued at the same patient pace. the sound of it now so constant that it stopped registering as sound and started registering as something closer to silence, a texture underneath the room rather than a noise inside it. Somewhere outside, a gutter empties itself in the same small trickling rhythm you noticed from the kitchen earlier, and a gust moves through the tree by the window, and its wet leaves shift and settle again, and none of it asks anything of you. You let your eyes move slowly around the room without any particular purpose, cataloging without meaning to. The way the candlelight moves differently on the wall than the lamplight does, more alive somehow, more restless in a small, contained way. The way the garland's colors have deepened now that the room around it is dim, no longer competing with daylight for attention. The way the wool throw has already gone warm from your legs, holding your own heat back against you the way it's designed to. Your mug is nearly empty now, just the last quarter of it, gone properly lukewarm, and you don't hurry to finish it. There's nowhere the afternoon needs you to be. Your eyelids have started to feel heavier than they were an hour ago. Not suddenly, just gradually. The way tiredness arrives on an afternoon like this. Not exhaustion, just a natural drift towards stillness that the rain and the candlelight and the warmth under the wool throw all seem to be gently encouraging. You set the mug down on the low table, empty now except for a thin ring of sediment at the bottom, and you don't reach for anything else. There's nothing else that needs reaching for. The room has everything in it that it needs. The low light, the small steady flames, the sound of water finding its way down glass and along gutters and into the wet dark ground somewhere below, patient and endless and completely indifferent to whether you're awake to hear it. Somewhere beneath the sound of the rain, you become aware of the house settling in its own small ways, a faint creak from a floorboard that has nothing to do with anyone walking on it, a soft tick from a radiator that hasn't come on yet but is beginning, distantly, to think about it. The whole structure around you adjusting itself to the change in weather, the same way you've spent the afternoon adjusting the room inside it. None of these sounds asks for your attention. They arrive and pass, and are absorbed back into the larger, steadier sound of the rain, the way a single word gets absorbed into a sentence you're only half listening to. You think, in a loose and unfocused way that doesn't quite form itself into full sentences, about the weeks ahead, the garland staying up long past today, the candles burning down further on other gray afternoons like this one, the pumpkins collecting a little dust on the sill until you get around to wiping them again sometime in October. None of it needs deciding now. The box is still open in the hallway, a little emptier than it was an hour ago, and you'll close it up again later, or tomorrow, or whenever you next pass it and remember. For now, it can stay exactly where it is, flaps open, the last of its contents undisturbed, patient in the dim hallway, the same way everything else in the house seems to have agreed to be patient this afternoon. You pull the throw up a little higher, tucking one loose corner of it under your arm, and you let your head rest back against the cushion behind you, eyes still open for now, watching the candle flames without really watching them, the way you'd watch something you already know so well that looking at it has become less about seeing and more about simply being near it. The pumpkins on the sill have gone almost to silhouette now in the dimness beyond the lamp's reach, their shapes still readable, still comforting in their small, blunt roundness, still holding their place at the window the way they'll hold it for the rest of the season, keeping watch on the rain on your behalf while you rest. The room around you no longer looks like the room it was this morning. Every choice you've made this afternoon, the garland, the small wooden shapes, the pressed leaves, the two lamps instead of the overhead light, the candles, the wool instead of the cotton, has moved the space, one small decision at a time, from where it was to somewhere new, somewhere that finally matches what the air outside has been telling you all day. Summer hasn't fully left. You can still picture the fruit bowl in the next room, still feel the ghost of this morning's open window somewhere in your memory of the day. But the room you're sitting in now belongs to what's coming, not what's leaving. And there's a particular kind of comfort in having made that shift yourself, with your own hands, one object at a time, rather than simply waiting for the calendar to make it for you. Your breathing has slowed to match the rain, or maybe the rain has simply revealed how slow your breathing already wanted to be. The candle flames have settled into their smallest, steadiest version of themselves, barely moving now, throwing the same soft, shifting light against the same patch of wall they've been lighting since you struck the match. You are aware, distantly, of the wool against your skin, of the last of the drink's warmth still somewhere inside you, of the specific hush that a rainy, late afternoon brings to a room that has finally stopped needing anything else done to it. You don't decide to close your eyes. They simply do, somewhere between one slow breath and the next, and the room continues on without your watching it, the candles burning low and steady, the lamps holding their warm circles against the gray outside, the rain still falling in the same unhurried rhythm it's kept since the first drops darkened the pavement, and the whole quiet weight of the afternoon settling gently over you, asking nothing, offering only this: the sound of water on glass, the last warmth of a mug now empty on the table beside you, and a room that has, at last, entirely become what it was always going to become,